you guys doing?
Very well.
Good. Good.
See, hey.
How are you?
Hey, Watson, nice to see you again.
Good to see you. Hey.
Mark
How's
Trinan.
it going?
Nice to see you again.
Dave Anderson,
Dave.
our district director.
Hi, I'm Donna Schwitzenberg, I'm a reader member of the board.
Good to see you. How are you doing?
Hi, Mary Hutton, my news editor.
Okay, how you doing?
Good.
Good.
We should do that.
All right, great. Well,
I'll see you later.
You have to stay for a picture at
Right.
least.
Hey, how are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Hi,
Hey, how's it going?
welcome.
Good to see
Hey,
you.
it's
How
great
you
to
doing?
great
You
to
too.
thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate that.
Great. Well, I think that we are up and running. So why not get started? Thanks for being here. We appreciate your taking the time for us, and we're looking forward to talking about your first 6-ish months as a congressman.
Yeah, 5
going
months.
on. And some of what has happened and some of what's on the horizon, I guess.
Great.
Why don't you get started? Why don't you start off? We're interested to hear sort of what from your point of view, what do you see as the top things that are on your radar right now, or maybe through this, since January, the top things that you guys have done?
Well, I think if you look at even the conversation that's taken place coming out of Washington, D.C., it's been a pretty decent focus on the debt deficits, what we were going to do for the continuing resolution in 2011, getting us to September 30th, but then more recently, what we're doing with fiscal year 2012 in that budget. So I think it's been a great focus around dollars. I think most people would agree that that's been the conversation coming out of Washington.
Sure.
Can I ask on that subject of debts and debt deficit, just to get it on the record and clarify, what is your position on the raising of the debt ceiling? I know that there are some elements of the conservative side that don't believe the debt ceiling should be raised.
Here's where I come at it from. If we stay on the current course, I think there's going to be major consequences for it. So I look at it and I say, listen, if we fundamentally change the way we're spending money, if we scale back the amount we're spending, if we get some reforms in there, I'll agree to raise it. But if we continue on the current course with no changes, I would not vote to increase the debt ceiling.
At the risk of defaulting,
Well, I think,
which the United States has never done before.
well, the president would make that call. We'll pass legislation out of the House that will propose the ability to increase the debt ceiling. So we'll work on it. And you might say, well, what has to be in there? There's a whole menu of items that we could look at, and I don't want to pigeonhole myself into what it has to be. But no, we will pass legislation out of the House proposing to increase the debt ceiling, and then the Senate and the President can handle that the way they see fit.
Are there 1, 2, 3 deal breakers that you would say, if this isn't included, I will not vote?
No, I'm not going to pigeonhole myself. I think I'm going to keep an open mind and look at what we come up with in the House. But I think there's a movement to say, listen, we truly have to figure out how we bring our budget into balance. As you guys are probably well aware, we're going to borrow $1.6 trillion this year. You look forward, we're going to, on average, borrow $1 trillion every year for the next 10 years. So we want to reduce spending.
Just one more thing on the debt ceiling specifically.
We're going right at it. Debt ceiling. That's how right out the bat.
I guess it's actually somewhat debated what the consequences would be of a default. I think Paul Ryan just today or yesterday said, maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing if we go a couple days beyond whatever that breaking point is. Maybe the bond markets wouldn't freak out. Do you have a sense of how high the stakes are? I mean, do you think that do you agree with that view, or do you think that it really could actually be catastrophic?
Well, I mean, to this point, we borrow 42 cents of every dollar we spend. So if some people will say, don't raise it at all. Someone in my party will say, don't raise it at all. If that's someone's position, where do you cut 40% out of the budget? If you wanted to do that, you would actually zero out your whole military, and you'd zero out your defense discretionary spending to balance the budget. Or then you'd have to cut Social Security or Medicaid. Those aren't reasonable choices. It takes time to balance a budget. And I'm willing to give the extension of credit, but we can't continue on the same course either. So I guess my philosophy is pretty simple. If we're going to cut up the credit card, I don't mind paying the bill. But if we're not going to cut it up and we're going to continue on the same course, I don't think that makes sense.
Well, I mean, as also that we're on the topic, right? This was the major thrust of your campaign, the debt deficit.
Yeah.
What do you see? You know, that was what you identified as your top priority once you got in. What do you see as significant steps that you've taken, or the House Republicans have taken?
Sure.
In that
Yeah, so,
direction?
so in the continuing resolution, if you remember, that started at the beginning of the year. Last year, the House didn't pass the budget. It didn't actually even propose a budget. So when the new Congress took over, we had to figure out how we're going to fund the government through the remainder of fiscal year 2011. And if you recall, there were some pretty distinct points. The Senate and the President said they didn't want to cut any spending. We said we wanted to cut. In the end, it became a conversation about how much we were going to cut, not whether we were going to cut or not. And I think that's a victory in and of itself. We ended up bringing spending down this year by $38 to $39 billion. Would have I liked to have seen it be more? Yes. But I think that was a good start. And so that was the first thing that we did. The second was the 2012 House budget proposal, where over the course of 10 years, we are cutting $6.2 trillion in spending. We're reforming Medicare for future generations, not for the current generation, and then we're reforming our tax code. So I think those are the big points with regard to, and I think we're talking 6.2 trillion. It's pretty significant.
You know, I'm just gonna listen for buzzwords, and every time you say one, I'm gonna ask a question, so Medicare.
Great. Well, watch what
All right,
buzzwords I say
so
here.
25 years from now, if I'm lucky, I'll be about retiring. What would your Medicare plan look like to me then? What would I have access to, and what would I be responsible for that maybe my mother isn't responsible for now?
Well, first of all, can I just explain where we're at? Because some people say, why would you talk about Medicare? Why would you propose changes to Medicare? And I got to tell you, is it politically expedient to talk about Medicare? I guarantee you, probably not. But I'm not going to lie to people. The Medicare trustees came out on Friday. Maybe you guys saw that report on Friday, where last year they projected that the Medicare trust fund would be exhausted in 2029. They moved it up 5 years. They now say it's going to be exhausted by 2024. We're already spending more than comes in to Medicare. And if you use the CBO numbers, not the trustee numbers, it's actually, I think it's 2019. So there is real issues with Medicare. If nothing's done, current seniors will see a reduction in their Medicare benefits because there's not enough money in the pot to pay for it. We have a situation in America where in the 1960s, you had 19 workers for every one retiree. Today, we have 3 workers for every retiree. You know, looking out 20 years, we're going to have 2.1 workers for every retiree. The baby boomers are about to retire. Healthcare costs are going up at 7% a year, and it's great. People live longer. So we have to say, if you want to keep this alive, we have to try to have a conversation about how we fix it. And I want to engage in that conversation. I don't want to put my head in the sand and say, I'm going to pass this on to a different congressman or a different generation. We don't have time. I want to work on a solution for it. So what we've done is said, listen, if you're in your retirement or you're near your retirement, you're about to retire, we can't ask to have you change this plan that you set your whole retirement up around. So we're going to guarantee it. We're going to guarantee it to you. 55 and older, you get the current plan that exists today. But for future retirees, we're going to set up a plan that is kind of like what I get as a congressman and most federal employees get. You'll have the ability to choose from a range of health care options, of insurance plans, where you get premium support. If you're someone who hasn't made as much money in your lifetime, you'll get more premium support. If you're a wealthier American, you'll get less premium support. If you're older and sicker, where those costs go up, we'll give you more support as well. But when we run the numbers on that, we're actually able to get the system to work. So people are going to have to pay a little more, but we can save it. And I think if you were honest with, and you guys know they're running ads against me saying I want to take away seniors' Medicare. Absolutely false. I'm trying to preserve it. And again, if we do nothing, this current system collapses. So I think if you talk to those who are in the retirement or near the retirement, you say, listen, you're going to get the current plan, they'd go, that's great. I can agree to that. And if you talk to people in future generations and you say, listen, there's going to be a Medicare plan that's available to you. It might be a little bit different. We're going to empower you instead of bureaucrats in Washington to go into the marketplace and pick what works for you and your family. A little bit different, but it's still going to be there for you. They would go, that's great, because right now I don't think I'm going to get anything in regard to Medicare. They know it's going bankrupt. So I think this works for both generations. And so, yeah, you'll be able to go, and not a bureaucrat won't pick what you're going to get. You'll be able to go in the marketplace. I don't know how much you've made in your lifetime, but you'll go in and you'll have to pay a little bit for your plan, like Medicare Part D. Pick what works for you, and go from there. You get
So
covered.
I'll have to set aside more money for that inevitability than, like I said, in my example, my mother would have had.
Well, and inevitably, the alternative is this. You guys have heard of the Independent Payment Advisory Board, IPAB. That's what the president has set up. And this is a board of 15 unelected bureaucrats that are going to make a decision as to how much we pay for services. And that's the way we're going to control costs. Well, to think that you can just continue to ratchet costs down on doctors and hospitals and think you're going to get the same service, I would submit to you that's probably not going to happen. This is a form of rationing. And so we can say you can contribute a little bit and you'll get more, or you can have the current program where it's basically worthless because they've rationed it down to nothing. I'd prefer to keep a system in place that actually works for people.
Well, one of the more, there's a whole universe of criticisms of this proposal, the Ryan plan that we're talking about. To me, one of the
The House budget plan.
Yeah, the House budget plan, indeed. To me, one of the more persuasive criticisms is that, so you convert to a voucher system over time. The vouchers, though, do not grow at the rate